So the thing is, this being a 6A revision motherboard, and I don't know if it came with it, but this has a Fatter Agnus, as we can see. And I know that even if this did come with a Fatter Agnus, was not enabled by default. And if I look at the jumper, JB2, somebody's been in here, and I can't say who, like 20-something years ago. A little kludge, but okay. But I do know that the position that JP2 in has it, the Fatter Agnus disabled. And I've gone through the baseboard documentation, and I'm like, So this could explain why I can't get the extra chip RAM going, because I can't enable anything on the card for Fatter. I'm thinking, right? Anyway, this is kind of nasty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this back to enable the Fatter Agnus and see what we could get going. In doing so, I should be able to come revisit all these jumpers over here and the jumper over here. We'll see. Solder with a vacuum and tested with a multimeter. There's no longer continuity between 2 and 3. I will build the bridge between 1 and 2. Moved the jumper over to the new position, tested the continuity, and ensured it did not touch that third pin, nice and clean. I moved all of the relevant dip switches here and under here to Fatter now. I'm not changing the software yet. I'm going to let everything boot up, make sure everything's working okay. We'll note that it crashed using the FAT configuration. To rebuild the boot disk, I put in the ACA500, just so I'd be able to load the software to get the right config on the boot disk. Sure enough, in looking at the A500 build profiles, it activated the 1 meg chip RAM on F3. This is a good sign because it means that it is detecting 1 meg of chip RAM from the Fatter Agnus now. This is awesome, so I'm going to go back and actually boot Workbench and see if the ACA500 grabs the full meg. This would be great. This would be mission accomplished. Furthermore, the Amiga gods have bestowed upon me a 2450 battery, so we're going to install that now and see if we can get the real-time clock to work. And there we go. It's installed. We'll give it a whirl. So right out the door, this is what we're seeing. I see the chip RAM, right? When I look at RTC, and I guess it's real-time clock, it still says here that it is not detected, but I know that off of the older boot disk it is. Not knowing if that is a limitation of the ACA500 Plus, I'm willing to let it boot up and see what happens, right? So I'm going to do that. Tab the next page and back out. And we're just going to start with the normal boot procedure here. And if I look here, it does say clock not found. And this gives me pause. I would like to put in one of the boot disks and see what happens. I didn't see anything about real-time clock there. I'm going to try a boot using the 500 just normal configuration. That is interesting. It is not finding the clock. I'm going to have to find out why. So when I pull the ACA500 Plus, it looks like the real-time clock is detected. I'm wondering why that is. What I'm going to do is put the ACA500 Plus back in and see if the issue returns, just to make sure this wasn't a fluke. Again, I look back and the clock is not detected, and I have a good feeling that it's not going to be found on boot either. Yeah, the clock is not found when the ACA500 is plugged in. I wonder if I use the older Kickstart, if that fixes it. Let me try that. This is the last test I'm going to do. I'm going to hit F2 to run Kickstart 1.3. Well, that's very interesting. I have no idea what to make of that. What happens if I attempt to save to the clock? If maybe that's what it requires. Okay, let's see what happens now. It's being detected now on the 1.3 with the ACA500 in. This is good news. Yeah, I don't know. Now that I set the clock, I mean, if you look at the system information, we can see that the clock is detected. I don't know what's going on. I guess what happens is if there's an invalid value in the clock, then it doesn't detect it or what. And that's my assumption, but now it's finding it. So I'm going to just boot up normally and see what we got. Mind you, I've completely cut power. The power has been off, so we'll see what we got. And sure enough, the time is saved. The real-time clock is working. Mission accomplished. We're done. And yeah, Y2K compliant. Monday, the 2nd of April, 2018. And this is the current time. We could also see that it was found in the swanky time preferences GUI. For those who use that, it could be set here as well now. So yeah, cool. We got to get down to business now. Like I had mentioned in the previous video, I'm going to be destroying all of this. I've been able to use this Workbench here as a educational tool to figure out what I was going to be installing, and I installed a lot of crap along the way to figure it out. It came down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of software. 2 of them you saw me install in the last video, and those 2 are correct, and that was the LHA run and the sysinfo. The other 6 I will be installing in this video, and that does include WHDload, so that's a big one right there. And that's what we're going to be doing next. So I'm not going to do the reinstallation here. Everybody saw that in the last video. I'm going to get it up and running, maybe discuss some of the partition work, and then once I have it as I like it, partition work and installed, then we'll just get right back where we left off with everything now working with our 1 mega RAM, everything all nice, all the drives like we want it, and then the extra software that I've already figured out and installed. It took hours to go through and sort through stuff that I didn't include in the video to get this where I wanted it to be. So this is the utility I'm using to set up the hard drive. If you use the other utility, it's going to make a single 8 gig or 4 gig partition or whatever, and that's it. It's not going to be good. One big Workbench partition. I have here the bootable SDH0 is 1 gig, and I know it's a bit much, but I got just a ton of space, so 1 gig is fine if I need to rebuild it. Then I have SDH1 is 3.2, 3.3 gigs, and SDH2 is another 3.3 gigs. So that's 3 partitions all set up. These 2 are not bootable, obviously, and this one is. So that's what we're going with. And I'm going to format the drive. Unfortunately, when you leave this program, it's going to make you reboot the computer, and that means having to reload all those floppy disks again, so it takes another 5 minutes to boot up. That's just something about the ACA500 Plus. This is a feature, not a bug, and I'm good with that, right? So, and I hit the Save Change button. Now when I hit Continue, it crashes. That's fine. No big deal. It doesn't seem to reboot gracefully by itself. The thing is now, I have to hit F7 in order to come back into this, and that means unpacking all those disks again. Program, what I'm going to have to do is actually go and format these. So I just go to Format. I'm going to give it a volume name, and I believe this one is going to be appropriately Workbench. The other ones I will give later, right? Just going to hit the Format button. I could do quick format, but I'm just going to hit Format. And this is 1045 megabytes. Do I really, really want to? Yeah, I'm going to let that go. I'll tell you right now that the not quick format takes a painfully long time, so if you're not going to do quick format, you better make some popcorn. And this time I'm going to be doing a bilingual installation. And I'm now up and running on the actual hard drive installation. What I'm going to do is format and name these 2 drives now. And this time I'm going to use quick format because that was just terrible. You know, so much better. I'm calling this one storage because I am just not creative this evening. I'll probably change it if I find a better name while searching through Google for possible good names for this. There we go. So what I want to do, so I open up the clock and I see that it is April 2nd, which means real-time clock is working just fine. Showing the right time, and that is good enough for me. Go in icon edit. We're going to open the parent, the volume, Workbench, disk info, and we're going to save as volumes, games, disk info. And we're going to save as volumes, storage, disk info. Right, really easy. And just like that, we can see that I now have hard drive icons for those 2. And you click on them and it's got the little light that appears. All done. So that is finished, and we now have a fully running 3-drive vanilla installation of Workbench, complete with trash cans, and we are ready to proceed. Now I got to take this card, throw it back in the Linux machine, reformat it as FAT32, and then start dropping those files from my approved list of installed software so far onto here so we could start putting it back onto the Workbench or onto the Amiga. I've repartitioned and formatted this for FAT32. I'm going to pop it in and see how it works. Very good. It even took the name from Linux. So all I need to do is give it the proper icon like these. There we go. Now it has an icon. It's also denoted with a compact flash. I'll tell you what, I got tired of making an icon for CF Tool until I find a way to... I'm going to save it somewhere else because I keep deleting it on Linux when I flush this thing out. It's just getting annoying. So I leave it alone. But continuing with the last two programs that I installed, the next important program I found is called ADF to Disk. And that could be found in the same location. I'll provide a link below. And that's important because a lot of times you get these ADF files, and the installation of this program might require you actually installing it via a disk. And if you don't have one of those like USB storage ADF disk drive upgrade thingies, this is the only way to do it. So I'm going to just display how this works. I would just type ADF to disk, and I happen to have a disk in the drive, and no other parameters are required. Obviously, it knows you're going to the disk drive, right? And I have a serial program called aterm. Now, if I eject the disk and put it back in, it's actually up here in the top right corner, right? It's now a full disk image. I just picked this program for no particular reason. It started with A, but this is a regular Amiga disk with terminal software on it. So, I mean, you could run it from the floppy drive. Some programs you could install. Some programs are freeware, some not so much. So, the next program that we're going to install is MUI version 3.8. I'm going to do that now. Now there's an MUI directory on the CF card, allowing for the installation. Installation is finished. Gonna have to restart the computer for MUI to work. I rebooted the computer and I'm now in the directory and storage with MUI, so I open it up. We'll have a quick look and I can preview it, get a little glimpse of the possibilities. So yeah, that's kind of cool if you're not a purist and that's what you want to use. So we can see the sad face and the happy face and all sorts of stuff. Right? I think there's a second preview as well, if you really want to get in there. Yeah, I mean, not bad. Whatever your preference is. The next one is WHDload. This is a favorite for everybody, and this one is always riddled in mystery because it doesn't work for a lot of folks, and with good reason. And let me just install it. We're going to extract it first. You'll note that I'm using the WHDload user small that came from the official website. So the extraction is done. There should be an install directory available in CF card. So we will go there now and open it up. Sure enough, in CF card, install program. And we can see that we are going to need to install installer. In order to do this, no big deal. That's going to be our next program. And so I'll be installing installer right quick. Installer creates a folder with some information, but there's no actual installation required for installer. That would be somewhat ironic. Instead, the actual installer file is available right here, so this could be copied into Workbench C. That's it. It's done. We could go back to what we were doing with WHDloader. Here we are back at WHDloader, and we can see that installer is working. Now it's asking me where to install it. This is not where we're installing the games. This is where we're actually installing WHDloader itself. So I'm just going to choose C because why not, right? So that's just fine. It's not like really big. I wouldn't put the games there, right? So help could go there too. No big deal. Probably don't need help in every language, but okay. WHDload is installed. Believe it or not, this is pretty much the end of the story for WHDload. Unless, of course, you don't really understand how it works, and this is where things get complicated. In order to illustrate what the problem is, I have two files here. I have a LHA file for the Quadlight C64 demo. I've selected this for the example because it's a small demo and it's really easy, right? This is just a slave file for the loader. And this right here is the Quadlight demo itself in ADF format, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that on face value, I somehow owned this demo, right? And I'm going to take this ADF file and I'm going to make a disk image of it using ADF to disk. So I'm going to do that right quick. So we're going to let this crunch, and when this is done, I'm going to pull this disk out of the disk drive, right? I'm just setting this up for the purpose of an example. If we look now, we could see the floppy drive showing that disk is inserted, and I'm going to take it out. Disk is out of the drive. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I have this disk with the demo, and I want to make it part of my WHD loader. So I'm going to uncompact this slave file here, and I'm going to do that now. And this is providing an installer, right? So the assumption is already that I own the software, and that's what this is about. This is not a moral discussion about ownership of software for companies that went out of business like 30 years ago. My discussion here is purely technical and the hangups of WHD loaders. So whatever you as the viewer decides to do or where you get your software is none of my business. This is purely a demonstration, right? So we could see that there's an info.install, so I should be able to have a clickable icon within my CF card. Notice for this demo, I'm installing it to CF card. I'm not installing it on the hard drive because it's just a demo. Sure enough, we could see in CF card is a C64 demo install, so I click that, right? And there is a README file which will give you information about the installer and things that you might want to know, like how much RAM you need. You could see this one requires 0.5 meg, right? I know that I got 1 mega chip RAM, so if you're going to see something that's going to be like you need a meg and you only got 0.5 meg, it ain't going to work, right? And you say, well, yeah, but it works fine when I run it off floppy. But you're not running it off floppy. You're running it with Workbench running, and you're running it with a whole bunch of other processes running, and WHDload running, and that takes memory, right? So it's a lot more intensive than it is when you're running it off a floppy disk without an operating system in the background. So keep that in mind. This one, however, I've selected this just because it's just got no requirements whatsoever, right? So everything and a whole bunch of people are really strange and stupid names. And we scroll down and we look for any information. This one has just very limited things and works with everything. It's just a bundle of joy, right? So I close it and I'm going to install now. This is where things go wrong. This is where you have to be very careful. So we're going to choose the intermediate, right? That's fine. We're going to do a real install, right? And we'll get this warning is absolutely fine. It'll tell your installer is outdated, right? The installer that I'm using is appropriate for 3.1 for the ACA500 Plus. So there's no worries whatsoever, right? And the README opens again. I close it, right? And it's going to ask me where I want to put this, right? And I don't want to put it in storage, right? So I want to show drives, place it in the CF card, and proceed, right? So the installation is underway. This is very important. I'm now asked a couple of questions here, right? I have a choice. I can choose a real floppy disk, and that's why I made one for the purpose of this demonstration. I can choose an ADF file, right? And I should be prompted for the location on my computer for an ADF file, or a CAPS, SPS, or warp image. These are different types of images of disks. I believe that they are true images, something like copy protection and all. I'm not entirely sure, right? Don't quote me on it. I believe there is a help here that tells you. It doesn't tell you what you really need to know. Yeah, So it does inform you that you do need software installed to do this stuff, right? So you're going to see here that track warp is required. Library for track warp to ADF must be version 1.1 or better. So it's giving you these options for installation. Doesn't necessarily mean you're allowed to do it, right? What it is not telling you is this. If you run and start installing the software, right, for the ADF related stuff, some of them are only designed to operate on 68020 or better. So when you load the libraries, because it'll say there are certain libraries that it wants to load in boot time, what happens is when you reboot your computer, it's not going to turn on anymore. It's crashed. It's done, right? So then you have to go in with the boot disk into the that file that tells you how you want to execute stuff as the computer boots up, and you have to comment out that line to stop that from happening. It's like an 88,000,004 error that I got, right? So it was terrible. But getting back to it, so I'm going to say real floppy disk, right? And I'm going to hit proceed, and it's going to say insert the demo disk in any drive. So okay, fine. And we could see it sees it as a legitimate disk in this instance, and it's going to pull that disk and make a loader and everything. And yeah, should be perfect. I'm going to point out too that most people don't do this. Most people go and get already pre-installed WHDloader images, because there's like a bazillion of them on the internet, and copy those directories directly onto their computer, click the icon and play the game, right? Again, you know, company went out of business like 30 years ago. Some people call it piracy, some people call it whatever. I really don't care what you call it. Again, technical demonstration here. Take what you will from it, right? But this is, in case you're wondering how to legitimately use WHDloader, if you had an actual install disk of your software, this is it right now. So let's do this and see what happens. So I'm going to click proceed. And I'm going to go to my CF card, right? And I can see a new folder here called C64 Demo. And yeah, a little weak on the icon creation there. But okay, fine. That's not a big deal. And I'm going to double click it. And sure enough, there you go. Remember, F10 to quit. You got to know that. There's no way out. And sure enough, this little demo here is a running. You know, no, on the hard drive, WHDload is operational. So there it is. There's a demonstration of WHDload. F10 brings you back. Successful. By comparison, it's worth noting you could go online and download a zip file by beginning letter of a game that's 300 megabytes. That'll include like 500 of the games. Pull whatever zip file you want right into the directory of the hard drive or CF card, and there it is. It's installed, right? So I could click on Super Hang On. Again, weak on the icons. They do have README files, because these packages do include the slave files. They're complete installations, right? So you would still want to read the individual README files and make sure that you had whatever was required, right? For instance, this one was made with the who comes up with these acronyms, right? This is an imager that requires an actual original disk, right, with copy protection at all, and then the copy protection would have to be broken, right? You could back out with the F10 key, but you need a 68010 or better, or an ACA500 plus for that matter, will allow you to do that, though I do not have it enabled. So if I load this program, I'm not going to be able to back out of it. But just to show you that it works, you know, I click on it and, you know, the game loads. But F10 will not work because I don't have F10 enabled in the ACA500, so I must reboot. According to this README, Smash TV should work. Let's give it a shot. There you go. According to this, Street Fighter should work. Just going through these real quick. See if they function, see if they exit. Print screen is quit on this one. Interesting. That's terrible. Somebody made this? Hadouken! Imagine being a kid, saving up their money, going to the store and buying this because the box looked cool, and coming home and playing this piece of crap. This is why people stole software back then, because so much of it sucked. I think that about does it for this video. I've covered the WHD loader, the real-time clock, a couple of other things, and yeah, it's getting a bit long. So when I have more Amiga stuff to share, I will make another video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.